Happy New Year to all of you again. And I know several of you were not here last week. And so I started the first message, which sort of like the State of the Union message. And so if you missed that State of the Union message, go online and listen to it, because there I shared to the church about our theme for 2011. Now, just for the benefit of those who were not here, I'd like to ask, first of all, those of you who were here last week, I have a little gift here. Okay, it's a little plaque. It's a very nice little plaque. It's kind of like crystal-y, like plastic, laminated, and has a Proverbs 17 on it. I want to give it to anybody who can come up here first. Okay, the first person who can come up here and grab this mic from me and quote correctly the 2011 theme for LIC. Anyone dares to come up here? Okay, just come up here, come on. Maybe next time I have to be a, what? Has to be a $100 bill? Or anybody wants to try to? Kathy, come on up, Kathy. All right, here's Kathy. Yes, let's give Kathy a hand. That's, all right. Kathy, smile, it's okay. No, it's not that bad.
Can you repeat the question again?
In Chinese? Okay, go ahead.
What's the question?
Oh, what's the question? What is, are you serious? I thought you were joking. What is the 2011 theme for LIC? Can you quote it correctly as much as?
Okay. Building a healthy church by love God first.
All right, there it is. There you go. Congratulations, Kathy. Thank you. Proverbs 17. All right. Put it on your desk. It would be great. Thank you, Kathy. Yes, our theme this year for 2011 is building a healthy church by loving God first. Okay, who's playing with the lights here? Okay. And this theme is basically, we want to, as a church, we want to focus in everything that we do, whether it's in our marriage, whether it's in our job, our work, our ministries. Our focus is going to be to the Lord first. Because our ministry, our job, our marriage, and so on should be an outflow of our intimacy with God. And so that's sort of like our focus and our goal for 2011. Not that we forget about previous themes, but at least for this year, we want to be able to remember that. And everything that we do, try to remember, hey, am I doing this because I love God first? Am I teaching the kids? Or am I working? Am I feeding my family? Am I doing this particular ministry because I love God first? And that's sort of like something that we want to be reminded every time, because it's very easy for us to leave that first love from God. And so I started last week with the 7 churches that is described in the book of Revelation 2 and 3. And this is adapted from David Jeremiah's message. But the 7 churches that's described there has a lot of things that we can learn. And so the Lord spoke to me in October that from Ephesians, or Ephesus, the church in Ephesus, because that church was a church that abandoned their first love. And so, I thought that would be a good introduction for us. And by the way, out of the 7 churches, there's only 2, the one in the yellow, number 2 and 6, that did not receive a negative diagnosis from God, okay? The rest, as you have seen from last week, received some kind of negative diagnosis. So I kind of summarized last week a little bit of introduction about the book of Revelation, especially the 7 letters to the 7 churches. And I mentioned to you that all the letters to the 7 churches starts with some kind of description of Jesus, okay? And then some kind of diagnosis about their condition, and then God will give them a prescription if it's something that they need to do, to repent, to correct themselves. And there's also a reward if we are faithful to Him. And then, of course, it ends with a conclusion, which usually says, "He who has an ear, let him hear," and so on and so on. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the 7 churches. And so, but most importantly, it is the application. The applications, because this is what I believe. The 7 churches in the book of Revelation were not only just 7 literal churches that existed 2,000 years ago, but more importantly, the description of these 7 churches actually describe the 7 churches that kind of exist even until today. So a lot of the description in those 7 churches will be speaking to all kind of churches that has existed from then until today. And then, so in other words, even LIC will fit into one of those 7 churches, or a combination of those 7 churches. And so it's speaking to us. And even more important on top of that is that each one of us will probably have some kind of characteristic like one of these 7 churches. So that's why as we are listening to this message, I would encourage all of us here to first of all listen for ourselves. Not thinking about our spouse or thinking about some other person, oh, this is good for that person. No. Think about ourselves. Is this message speaking to me? Is the description of this particular church has characteristic that is describing me? And if it is, then we need to listen to the prescription. And if we are a body of this church, we are a member of this church, then we can also think, hey, is this describing our church, LIC? And if it is, then we need to correct ourselves according to the prescription that God gave. So last week I started with the church in Ephesus, and I mentioned that church is a very dynamic church. It has a really great church because it has all the 5 Ds that's mentioned there: dynamic, dedicated, determined, disciplined, and discerning from all the scriptures, okay? But unfortunately, the diagnosis that God gave also is that they have one thing lacking about them, and that is they left, they abandoned their first love, which has become an indictment by God towards this church. And so the important thing that I want to share here from the last week's message was the fact that we can become a very active and dynamic and great church in regards in the outside with our activities, with our programs, and yet God can be displeased with us because of the lack of true love to Him. And so the same thing with individual. We can be an active person. We can, have a good job. We can do great ministries. We're doing a lot of helping a philanthropist or whatever. And yet, God can be displeased with us if we do not put Him first in our life. And so the prescription that we gave was remember, repent, and repeat. Okay, remember, repent, and repeat. Repeat again what we have done when we first in love with Him. Now, before we go on to the second church that I'm going to discuss tonight, I'm going to invite Ina, and because I asked her to give a testimony because she shared something that I thought would be that can be a blessing to all of us about how this particular the last week's message about first love have spoken to her. So I'm going to invite Ina to come now. Let's give her a warm welcome just to encourage her.
For a bit. So last week, Pastor Ed sent me an email asking Ina. I saw that Mimi actually told him that I was crying, and she asked me what happened. So I said, oh no, nothing's happened. But since he is the pastor, he's asking. So I said, well, the reason I am crying was because of him. Not that he hurt me or he beat me or something, but the reason was because through the fellowship and through the message last week, he was able to remind me again how I felt when I first loved him, how I felt when I first knowing God. When I first loved God, my feeling was like my 4-year-old son, Evan, if you know my son. Before he was born, I told him every day, I love you, I love you. Even until today, I still tell him, I love you every day. And then, right now, when I told him, Evan, I love you, you know what he said? I love you too, Mommy. When I told him, Evan, I am happy you are my son. And what he said, I am happy that you are my mommy. And that comes from a 4-year-old. He just turned 4 a few months ago. And then he told me yesterday, suddenly, randomly, he said, Mommy, I'm going to be very happy today. I asked him, what happened? Because I know you love me. That's what he said. So when I discipline him, he will be throwing tantrum, he will be mad, he will be screaming, yelling. But one thing that he knows and he never doubt is that I love him. He's mad like 10 minutes, and then he will be back at me and say, I know you love me. And then one more thing that I feel very loved was, if I go to the grocery store, I post him in the shopping cart, he will sing, Mommy, you are beautiful. Mommy, you are pretty. So people look at me and smile. You see, that was how I felt before.